there was only one consciousness in God, he would be bored and he would suffer from unbearable boredom and he would be wondering, what am I going to do with myself? If this is not the epitome of paganism and polytheism, then I'm really not sure what is. And today, yes, you know what I'm about to say. We have another exciting episode for you guys. Another video on the so-called trash and filth debate between the two Muslims and the two Christians. Here is something that I want to highlight for some of my audience that may be familiar with Jay Dyer and the Eastern Orthodoxy and their positions on the Trinity, and the fact that I debated Jay a few months ago and I declared and demonstrated, I think quite clearly, that he is a polytheist. There's something related to that came up in the Trinity versus Tawhid section of the debate between Daniel Ijaz and the two Christians that we just mentioned. And in part of that, Daniel was bringing up the point that the theology of the Christians, and especially Jay in this case, the Eastern Orthodox, results in God having three distinct minds. And if there are three distinct minds and three distinct wills in the Trinity, then that's clearly polytheism. If that's not polytheism, then what the heck is? And this was a brilliant point that he brought up. So I want to play a couple clips from the debate in this regard, and then I'm going to share with you a very powerful quote from someone that Jay Dyer thinks is the person who wrote the book that brought him to Eastern Orthodoxy. Because Jay before was a Protestant, then he became a Catholic, and eventually he became Eastern Orthodoxy. The author that meant the most to him, the scholar that meant the most to him in terms of modern-day scholarship amongst Orthodoxy. We're going to show a quote from him which completely buries Jay Dyer and shows him and the Eastern Orthodox to be the polytheists that they are, because they believe that God in the Trinity has three minds, which is certainly three gods. So let's take a look.
Christ does not have a human person, and that's why the notion about divine mind is a two-mind scenario where he shares a divine mind with the Father and he has limitations in his human mind. That's why it's two minds. So you tried to say that he had one mind and it was separate knowledge. The expression where he says that he's limited in knowledge is a reference to rhetoric. And if you can read St. Basil, letter 234, 5, and 6, he talks about these issues and explains that just as, so again.
Do you guys remember when Sam Shamoun was saying something about, you guys can't rely on your scholars who come hundreds of years later. You have to listen to my ridiculous interpretation about the hadith of the Quran coming and interceding on your behalf. You have to believe what I'm saying, that means that's a separate and distinct God. So Muslims are polytheists, and you must take my ridiculous interpretation of this hadith. You must also not rely on scholars who say that the spirit in the Quran is Jibreel alayhi salam. You can't also rely on hadith for that or other scholarship. No, you have to take my ridiculous interpretation, which originates from my mother's kitchen, and you can't rely on your religious tradition. Well, Jay criticized Ijaz for not allowing Jay to appeal to tradition, and Jay himself does appeal to tradition regarding Matthew 24:36 and Mark 13:32, the famous passage where it said that Jesus or the Son does not know the day or the hour. He doesn't know when Judgment Day is going to be or his second coming. And because of that, Muslims and even Unitarian Christians point out that Jesus can't be God because God is all-knowing and Jesus or the Son isn't all-knowing. There's at least one thing that he doesn't know in the Bible, and we point out other examples, so therefore he can't be God. Well, Jay takes an interpretation from good old St. Basil, who's probably in the early 300s around the time that he's writing the text that Jay's talking about. So about 300 years after Christ, you can appeal to a text from him, even though, very clearly, guess what? All of the other people before so-called St. Basil, and many Christians even around the same time, did not have that interpretation of the text, like Athanasius, like Hilary, so on and so forth. They did not interpret it that way. They said that Christ was ignorant even with respect to his human nature. Jay doesn't even take that position. That position is called the Agnoete heresy, which I'll put a link in the description of this video where I've made a video on that showing that Sam Shamoun is a heretic according to his own Catholic Church for saying that is a permissible position to take and that he's holding a heretical position. But Jay is allowed to appeal to tradition when it suits them to come up with a wacky interpretation of Mark 13:32, but Muslims can't do it when defending our position and interpretation of the hadith instead of taking Sam's ridiculous interpretation or taking his ridiculous interpretation of who or what the spirit is in the Quran. Neither interpretation offered by Sam is held by any of the Orthodox Sunni Muslims, but we have to take his interpretation. So I just wanted to remind the audience of that and point that out. But getting back to this three-mind issue, Jay is saying here that the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit in the Trinity, within the divine nature, they all possess one mind. So just keep that in mind.
Jesus doesn't have a separate divine mind. He shares the same divine mind as the Father. And when he assumed...
So the Son does not have a separate divine mind from the Father. They share the same divine mind. But he had a human mind that the Father didn't have, which his Son uniquely had.
Human nature. He assumed a human mind. That's part of the fullness of human nature. So we don't say that he's separate, just like the persons of the Trinity are distinct but not separate, just like you believe attributes are distinct, not separate. Now, I know that you can't seem to follow the fact that we're not saying you believe the attributes actually have minds.
Oh, we're not saying, look at this, he's throwing Sammy under the bus. We're not saying that you believe the attributes actually have minds. That's exactly what your debate partner did in a large part of the first section of the debate. He was claiming that Muslims must accept that the Quran, because it supposedly speaks and intercedes on the day of resurrection for Muslims, they must accept that the Quran, which is an attribute of God, has its own mind, and therefore Muslims believe that there are multiple minds within God. That's exactly what your debate partner said, and yet you're claiming that that's not what you guys are arguing. Well, that's exactly what Sam Shamoun was arguing, which shows that you guys are not coordinated in debate, and that's partly, probably because you believe that Sam holds a heretical position, so you heretics probably don't talk enough to really get clear on what your debate strategy and arguments were going to be before the debate. And so you make the claim that that's not what you're arguing, but that's exactly what your partner was arguing all throughout the debate. Now, Jay is making the claim that he believes that there's only one mind in the Trinity, that the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit all share the same divine mind. That's fine. I know that there are many earlier Christian scholars who said that, and Jay is trying to represent that position. I critiqued it. I demonstrated in my debate with him and also with Bo Berenson. I gave several arguments for why that can't be the case, but I suggest that you guys take a look at that in my what's called the argument from Indexicals, where I demonstrated that at least the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit know that they are themselves and not each other, which means they can't have the same knowledge because the Father doesn't know that the Father is the Son. He knows he's the Father and not the Son. Same thing with the Son and the Holy Spirit. Therefore, they can't have the same knowledge, which means they can't have the same mind. Anyway, people can go check out those debates and discussions where I have that, and I'll try to put links to that in the description of this video. Also, going back to this issue now, Jay is trying to represent the position that they all have the same mind. But what I'm going to show you here is Jay also recommends a book, which I'm going to quote, who he says is one of the greatest books that he's ever read, that brought him to the Orthodox faith. It's a scholar who he respects to the utmost highest, who would be the akin of, for modern day Salafis, of someone like Sheikh Ibn Uthaymeen, or you could say Sheikh Al-Albani, or one of these great shuyukh, according to modern day Salafis, who I respect them, right? I hold them very dearly. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala have mercy on both of them. And I'm just drawing an analogy for people who are not familiar with the person I'm about to introduce. He would be akin to them because he was in the 20th century. So he was a more modern scholar, but Jay reveres him, considers him of the status of somebody like Sheikh Al-Albani. And we'll see, and I'm going to read a quote from the book that he himself recommends as one of his top 15 books for orthodoxy, because that's where this clip comes from. And I'm going to show in that video that he explicitly is saying that there are three minds in the Trinity, and there must be three minds in the Trinity. So his own scholar who he recommends, and the book he recommends, is polytheistic and believes that there's three minds in the Trinity, but Jay still recommends them and claims that he believes there's only one mind in the Trinity. So anyway, let's take a look at what Jay what this book is and what he says about this author.
Another theological text that is one of the most important for me, and this helped me understand the importance of revelation. I don't think I would have become Orthodox if I hadn't read this book.
He wouldn't have become Orthodox if he hadn't read this book. So it's extremely important to him.
It is one of the most important for convincing me of Orthodox theology, because it actually dealt with a lot of the Western presuppositions and objections and concerns that I had. And so I'm so glad that I read Father Demetrius Staniloae's.
Father Demetrius Staniloae, Orthodox Dogmatic Theology, The Experience of God, and this is volume 1. Look at all the notes he's got there. I wonder if he has a note on this page. Jay, if you respond, let me know. Did you have a note on this page? Did you have it highlighted? Did you realize the part where your great scholar actually admitted to you guys being polytheists? Did you know that? Let's take a look.
Experience of God, volume 1. And it also is not an easy text. I think you will find it difficult when you get into it, especially the 50 or 60 pages or so that deal with the philosophy of time. But most of the arguments that you hear me make about the one and the many, the logi, the centrality of the logos as a divine hypostasis, he's the first Orthodox theologian to write a systematic theology, because this is, I think, a 5 or 6 part series. This is volume 1. He's the first Orthodox theologian in the modern world in the 20th century to really integrate the doctrine of the logi and the energies into his systematic theology. And so for me, this solves so many quandaries and theological questions that I had for so many years. And so it's definitely a must-have.
So this book is a must-have. Jay became Orthodox large part because of this book. This book solved so many theological quandaries that he had. And let's see, does he remember this part? So let's see if we can put it on the screen. Right? The Experience of God, volume 1, page 152. It says this, and I quote, "The life of the eternal subjectivity must be a fullness which in all respects is not a transitory one. It must consist in a love for another subjectivity, and in a perfect union between itself and that subjectivity, which has the same fullness, so as to be simultaneously unfailing life. The life of the eternal subjectivity is an infinite reference to its subjectivity contemplated within another I, so as to be truly love, eternally unfailing love. It is reference to another I who is himself also the bearer of his own infinite subjectivity and responds with that same eternal unfailing love. A divine I loves with an eternal inexhaustible love a thing proper to the divine, or with its fullness, which is like that of another I, and this occurs in reciprocity. This is divine life, and it exists together with immutable fullness. It is the same infinite existence of love, the love of an infinite person, directed towards another person worthy of infinite love, and vice versa, but within the interiority of the same subjectivity. In any other circumstances, eternity would be either an unbearable boredom if it were the prerogative of a single consciousness, or else an absurdity if it were the prerogative of a substance or a law that was aimless. So I know it's a lot of gobbledygook there, but what is he saying there? There are these 3 eternal I's or subjects, which is the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. So remember when I made the argument from Indexicals that the Father knows that I am the Son, the Son knows that I am, the Father knows that I am the Father, the Son knows that I am the Son, the Holy Spirit knows that I am the Holy Spirit. And they said, oh, but God doesn't, his knowledge is not in this indexical way. Maybe he's not thinking that way, in that sort of humanistic way, but he definitely knows of what it's like to be the Father versus being the Son. They know that they're not each other. And Staniloae here is saying that, look, there's this reciprocity between persons of love. It's almost like that famous Christian love argument that William Lane Craig uses, that I've refuted time and time again, of, well, if God is not a Trinity, then God isn't perfectly loving, because if he doesn't have someone to love in eternity past, then he couldn't truly be perfectly loving. So he needs this other I, this other subject, that he can perfectly love in order to be perfectly loving. And he even says here, why? In any other circumstance, besides the case of the Trinity, right? In any other circumstances, eternity would either be an unbearable boredom, so God would be bored if he's by himself. If there's not this other I, if there's not this other mind, if there's not this other consciousness, right? Then God would be bored. This is Christianity. This is clear paganism, polytheism. You need this other I, you need this other mind to talk to. It's like God, oh, God is sitting there, astaghfirullah. He's sitting there, he's like, oh, what am I going to do? I'm so bored. So I might as well do something because I'm so bored. And I'm thinking, what should I do? I mean, and you consider and criticize us of anthropomorphism and tashbih when you're attributing these kind of thoughts to God. Oh, if this weren't the case, then God would be bored. As if he's in solitude confinement, right? Solitary confinement. I mean, it's ridiculous. And then he says, in other circumstances, eternity would be either an unbearable boredom if it were the prerogative of a single consciousness. So there can be multiple consciousnesses, right? Or else an absurdity if it were the prerogative of a single substance or a law that was aimless. So when Jay denied and tried to say that there is not this indexical knowledge, very clearly Dimitri Staniloae is admitting that there is this type of indexical knowledge in God. There is something of what it's like to be the Son and the Father and the Holy Spirit, and they possess that knowledge in a unique way that the others don't possess in that same unique way, which means they don't have the exact same mode of knowledge and knowledge in the same sense, which means they are multiple minds, and this is polytheism, and that your ridiculous scholar here, which you're recommending this book, is basically admitting that and saying, yeah, there are three minds in the Trinity. And if there weren't three minds in the Trinity, if there were only one mind in God, then this would mean that he would be bored, right? If there was only one consciousness in God, he would be bored and he would suffer from unbearable boredom. And, he would be wondering, what am I going to do with myself? If this is not the epitome of paganism and polytheism, then I'm really not sure what is. With that being said, guys, if you enjoyed this video and found it educational, then please consider subscribing to the channel. Subscribe, hit that notification bell for future videos. Like, comment, let me know your thoughts about this pagan Jay Dyer. Share this video on your social media platforms, no matter how big or small your reach is. It really does help with the algorithm, guys. Please help do your part for the channel to continue to thrive. And if you want to go above and beyond and support the channel, then the best way to do so is at the GoFundMe link, which is pinned at the top of the description of this video, as well as my other videos, and also is pinned in the comment section of this video. With that being said, guys, until next time, inshallah, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.